Greetings, everyone. It is the 7th of March. This is Content Evolution New World. Glad to have you with us. And our guest today is Mark Prensky. And Mark is a serial author. Let me prove how much authorship he has. Look at all these books, all right, that Mark has penned over the years. And as I said in my preview note, I think that he isn't done. He's probably going to write more, all right? So be on the lookout for more Prensky, all right? But today we're going to hear from directly, all right, on future of youth. I know this is, Mark, a topic that you talk about, regularly, both to other groups, and you give us comments, all right, in this forum from time to time. So we're delighted to have you with us. And let me just ask, are you going to share any charts with us today?
Well, I'm going to show Jim's book, but that's
Okay.
the book cover is show his work, but
All
that's
right.
it.
Very good. Well, you have permission to share whenever it becomes time to do that. So we're delighted to have you. And I just want to welcome my co-host, Mike McGuire. Mike, how are you today?
Doing well. Sorry for being a minute late. Really looking
That's
forward
all
to
right.
today's conversation.
Good morning there, Mike.
Hey, Bruce.
Yeah, we've got your
Everybody.
neighbor, Mark, on with us, and I'm turning the call over to him now. Mark, great to have you with us. And you guys have any questions when we get to Q&A, put it in chat. I'll call on you in order, or raise your hand using the reactions function of Zoom. Mark.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm really thrilled to be here to present to CE. It's one of my favorite groups, and I want to share with you more about what I think and what I do, and get your feedback, and hopefully start some very interesting conversations. I'm really a futurist and a reframer, and my focus is young people. And that's been a focus for a long time. I coined the term digital natives 20 years ago. I've written, as you saw, a number of books for and addressed about young people. And before COVID, I was speaking around the world, giving talks to both adults and young people, in which I almost always tried to bring a panel of young people from the audience, local young people, up on stage to interview so we could hear their point of view, which in my opinion doesn't get heard enough. And by the way, there are about 2 billion, maybe even a little more, young people in the world. And I'm interested in all of them. I'm interested in the rich, the poor, the young, the younger, the older, all of them, because they all need help, and they're all moving into this new third millennium. And in that new third millennium, I see big changes coming for them and, of course, for us. But the big difference is that those of us who are adults, and that's almost everybody, well, today it's everybody over the age of 24, grew up in a different time. We grew up, and I'm certainly one of those. We grew up in the second millennium. I'm hearing some noise in the background.
Let me just check on things that are open here. Okay, go ahead.
So those of us who are adults grew up in the second millennium, and we reformed a lot, and our ideas and beliefs and what we do come a lot from that second millennium. I was born in 1946, so I had about 50 years or more in that millennium. And that really changed us in terms of made us the people that we are. The young people, of course, don't have that. They all grew up in the third millennium. And so they don't have the same influence that we have. And I think we're moving really quickly, and this is part of my thesis, is that we're moving from a time that was all of humanity before the third millennium. It's really the 103rd millennium. All of the time from the time people became Homo sapien to roughly the year 2000, which was a very long time, and we evolved post-biologically. We evolved language, we evolved social organization, we tamed animals, agriculture, we evolved I'm having a brain freeze here, excuse me. We evolved the science, we evolved writing in print, we evolved education, and all of those things were very important and brought us to this point. But it's interesting to me to observe that if we put people together from ancient Egypt and say the modern world and in the same roles, they would be relatively similar. There wasn't a whole lot of change in all those years. And now I think we're moving into a time when things will be very, very different. And I want to share with you two quotes. The first one is from Margaret Mead, whom I think many of you know about as a cultural anthropologist from the 20th century. And she said 50 years ago, "I believe we are on the verge of developing a new kind of culture. In this culture, it will be the child and not the parent or grandparent that represents what is to come." And she wrote that in 1973 in her book, Prefigurative Cultures and Unknown Children. And the second quote is, "Our kids will live in a world that's very different from ours. They want to be not like us, but like themselves and live in their own times." And that's a quote from me. So I think we live in this, we're moving into this really new age. It's a real frontier. It's something that didn't exist before. And in that age, all of us know who on this call know that the cognitive power of humans and human imagination is being extended enormously. It's in a sense going through the roof. And we've, in a sense, responded to what Einstein said when he said, "We can't solve the problems of today with the level of thinking we now have." We invented a new way of thinking. We invented this thing called algorithmic thinking. We used to have slow thinking of analytical and fast thinking of heuristic. Now we have analytical thinking. And maybe it's not a part of our wetware and will never be, but it is a part, I think, of human thinking, and it's helping us make a difference. And what that means is that we better start having our young people as early as possible, maybe even from birth, using this new form of thinking. So a great story is a father sitting with his daughter on his lap, and he's showing her pictures on the computer of animals, and this is a pig and this is an alligator, and she says, "I want a pig alligator." So he goes, "Oh, no problem," and he goes to Midjourney or whatever he goes to, and suddenly appears a pig alligator. And that's what young people can now create with their voice. And it's going to obviously go much bigger, and you'll be able to build a playhouse with your 3D printer and anything you can design, and it will go into the real world, and you'll be able to do so many things in their lifetime. And that's really what I'm interested in, that change that's dramatic coming. So I want to talk a little bit about my book, Empowered, my last published book. And I wanted to give a shout out to Jim Kwolek, who's really a wonderful guy and who designed the cover for this book, which I'm going to, where is it? It better be here, share with you, because he did it very well. I designed a cover that was not very attractive. And
much better.
He designed a much better one.
Jim does great work.
Yes, he does. And I'm really happy that he's part of the CE group, and that we are all part of the CE group. So thank you, Jim. And in that book, Empowered, I tried to reframe the times that our young people will live in this third millennium as a new age of empowerment. And I talk about who the young people are, that they're symbiotic hybrids. I talk about where they'll live, not just earth and imagination, but now in the cloud. I talk about what they believe and a whole set of new empowering 21st century beliefs. I talk about their future world as a new frontier of exploration and not just a repetition of the past. I talk about their aspirations of becoming inventors, of changing the world. I talk about their labels, because we often call them kids, or we call them students, or we call them learners, which I think is somewhat demeaning. I try to call them people who happen to be young. And I talk about the new generation of alphas, where we've run out of Latin alphabet and we're now moving to the Greek alphabet, or some people are. And I know people who talk about their alphas and they just say, wow, they're just totally different people. So that's part of what I do. I also reframe two important things. One is learning, because learning has been the goal of education for a very long time. And everything's about learning, and learning is what we measure. And I don't think it's a goal. I think learning is a means. I think learning is a means to accomplishment. And we learn in order to accomplish. And that's a different goal. And that's a goal that a better goal for us to have, accomplishment. And the learning comes as a very useful byproduct in that process. The second thing that I reframe is human skills, because we have this stupid idea of hard and soft, which I'm not sure exactly where that came from, but I think that's much better put as task-specific and transferable human capabilities. And the transferable human capabilities are things that take your whole lifetime. They're transferable lifetime capabilities. Just like music, you keep studying and you get better and better over your lifetime at these things. And then in the book, I go on to reframe a whole new growing up journey, which I call Growing Up Empowered, which consists of parenting, changes in parenting, from control to curation, from changes in the basics, and I'll go into that for a second here. Basics used to be reading and writing and arithmetic. I think the basics are changing dramatically. First, to what I call an accomplishment loop, where you keep going through a loop of seeing a problem or seeing something you want to work on, accomplishing, making a difference, and you keep going up through a spiral of more complex projects till you can do really important things. That there's something that I call Lego: love, empathy, gratitude, optimism, that we don't spend a lot of time on with young people, but those are some of the key things that we need to have. I think Esther Wojcicki's trick, trust, respect, independence, collaboration, kindness, needs to be a basic. And the fourth basic that I have is that we need to learn to live and operate in this period of exponential change, of rapid change, which we didn't have to do before, but is going to continue probably in the future. Then I talk about the school years, and I talk about empowerment hubs, which I'll come back to in a second. I talk about assessment as before and after, and measurable positive impact. I talk about higher education as finding peers, and I talk about work as changing to adding value to projects. So at the end of that book, I even reframe humanity, and I talked about a collective mind and species, which we may be going to, but we're certainly connected for the first time, and hopefully we're going there. But there's a big but. That book got published right months before ChatGPT came into the world. So I said, oh my God, everything's changed, and I'd better redo the book or put out a second edition. But I went back and I said, this just reinforces, it doesn't change, it just reinforces the idea that young people are becoming more powerful in the future. This is another form of empowering them. And so I did that. But I decided to write another book. So I'm now writing my 11th book, which has a working title, Third Millennium Kids. And it's a guide for adults born in the second millennium. They could be parents, they could be teachers, they could be politicians who are preparing children or educating children, whatever they're doing, working with children who were born in the third millennium. And because there are so many changes and there are so many preconceived ideas from the second millennium that adults have, I thought it was useful to offer a guide. And that guide is not something to do only tomorrow. That guide takes a 20-year time frame. Because if you don't have a longer time horizon, basically 20 years is the time it takes for a young person to become an adult, you don't see the full picture. And if I had to sum up the thesis of that book in just a couple of words, it would be from control to contribution. I think young people will make a huge contribution in the future. So I want to now talk about a few of the topics in that book. The first one is the decline of outside control. Several years ago, I wrote an article called The Death of Command and Control, when somebody said, you got to say the death of something to get publicity. But I think there really are changes that are coming, and particularly for young people, because control was the way that we dealt with young people for most of humanity, with, of course, some exceptions. We controlled young people through parenting, we controlled them through culture, we controlled them through school. And that was the way we did it. We told them what to do, we told them where to go, we told them what we expected of them, and if they complied, that was great. And if they didn't comply, we typically punished them in some way or another. And now we're seeing the diminishment, I think, of all of these different forms of control. And I think a lot of that has to do with the growth of technology, with social media, with YouTube, and especially peer-to-peer. The fact that they now can connect peer-to-peer with everybody in the world, this is having a huge influence. So that's one of the things, which is the decline of those old influences. Second one is something that you may have heard of, what's known in neuroscience as the late maturation of the prefrontal cortex. That part of the brain, the scientists think, doesn't fully mature, doesn't fully develop until you're in your 20s, until sort of between 20 and 25, they say. And that part, the prefrontal cortex, is the part that many think controls an important part of our behavior. It makes us take less risks. It helps us with planning. It's usually referred to as executive function, whatever that means. And the important part is that adults have it and kids don't. And so that in the past was considered a feature. Oh, nature built it in. They took time to build it in, but they built in this amount of control that people need. And I'm starting to wonder if it's not a bug in our times in the third millennium. Because one of the things that we need, in my view, more than anything else in the future, is more imagination from human beings. And I think the other thing is more self-knowledge. I'm not as concerned about critical thinking, which is what some people say, because I think a lot of that is becoming a machine part. A lot of artificial intelligence is helping with that. But imagination has traditionally been something that is really human. And we know from certain talks, certain experiments, most people think they were more imaginative as young people. Ken Robinson used to ask people, are you more imaginative now or then? And everybody thinks then. So young people do have this imagination. And I wonder, and I don't know the answer to this, but I have a serious wonder and hypothesis that the prefrontal cortex late development might be part of that. Another thing that I'm concerned about is our emotional side, because it's really interesting that while our intellectual side and our imagination side is going through the roof with AI and all these new things, our emotional side is pretty much the same as it's been for 100,000 years. We still have the good sides, of course, of love and empathy and gratitude and optimism, but we're still a belligerent species. We still fight each other. We still bully each other. There's a lot of sides that are negative in the emotional side. And so so I wonder if we can do something about that. And I think we're entering a time in the third millennium where we may be able to do that. And the reasons we can do that are because, number one, we might be able to develop something external like artificial emotional intelligence, AEI. And I know I've heard a lot of people working on this, so I'm going to be connecting with them and figuring that out. And the second part is that we're suddenly in a time where we can hack humans in ways we never could. We can physically hack them, we can control the genome, we can go with CRISPR, and I don't know what will happen, but it's possible that we can do something about some of the things that have been holding us back and rebalance the emotional side and the intellectual sides. So I think about that. And where this all leads is I'm thinking about an alternative way of bringing up young people. That's the overall way I'm thinking about it. The old ways are starting to work less and less well. The kids don't want to be in school. They don't want to have religion in the same way they've done before. They complain or rebel against things that their parents are making them do or the directions their parents tell them to go often. And this is described by lots of people. And I have an acronym called GANS, which means good analysis, no solution. And the fact that there are lots of people who analyze this and say, oh, yes, things are changing, and they'll tell you why the school system, for example, is so bad. Sir Ken Robinson used to do that really articulately and well, but they don't have very good solutions. And lots of people have innovations. We all know you can find those everywhere, but they're almost all incremental, just little, I call them icing on a stale cake. And second, they're based on at least two very wrong assumptions, in my view. The first assumption that's wrong is that the kids are really just little us's. They're like we were when we were kids. So a teacher is standing in front of her room and she sees young people and she said, oh, I know all about those young people. I was once one of them. That's not true. These are now people that she's looking at who are connected to everybody in the world. They have all the world's knowledge in their pockets. They're different people and they communicate in different ways. So they're not little us's. But a second assumption that's important is around motivation, because there's an assumption that if we just work at it hard enough and we put in the right things and the technologies and the right song and dances, we can convince a whole room of people to be interested in what we're interested in our subject, in whatever we teach, the mess, math, English, science, social studies. And in my view, that's not true, because young people are interested not in what we're interested in. We may get one or two or a few, but they're interested in what they're interested in. And that the only true motivation is doing something that you want to do. And that's not the way the world has been set up. Parents say you should do this or other things. So what I would love to do is to have something, to have the equivalent of the person who sees you as you see yourself and gives you good advice. And some of us are lucky to have those as parents or uncles or friends or whatever, but most of us don't have that. So that's a piece of what I'm trying to do. And that's led me to search for these new solutions. And I looked around the world and I've talked to people around the world. And from that, I've gradually pulled together an idea for an alternative. Not necessarily for everybody and not necessarily all the time, but I think it's a very different approach and it's much needed. And I call it empowerment, accomplishment, and impact by young people. And another title for that would be From Control to Contribution. And the way I encapsulate that for young people, and this is what I put on my business card, I think they should all understand and believe the following: I can, I choose, I accomplish, and I see positive results and impact from my actions. And I'd like every young person to know that and to practice that. And that would be a wonderful way to grow up, because if they do that over and over again, they will be different people. And as a great example of that, there's a wonderful video from a place called Design for Change that I love and am part of, that of 3-year-olds, preschoolers in Spain, and who were very frustrated because they were being told to throw away their garbage, but the bins on the poles outside were too high for them to reach. And this they saw as a real problem, and they through a process they went through. They designed new bins that were lower on the poles. They met with the mayor of the town. They described their problem. They got her agreement to put lower bins. And the last scene in this wonderful couple of minute video is these 3-year-olds jumping up and down around their new bins so that they're so happy that they got something. And I think that's wonderful. If 3-year-olds learn that they can make an impact in the world for something that they think they can make a positive impact in their world, and they learn that at 3, and they keep doing those projects over and over again in a spiral with more and more complexity as they get older, by the time they're 20, they will be very different people in the world. And the place where I see this happening, this kind of spiral of accomplishment happening, I call generically empowerment hubs. They don't have to be called that, but that's what I see as a place where young people go to do these projects over and over again. They've got to be projects where they think they can. They have to be projects of their own choice, and they have to result in a measurable positive impact. There has to be an impact on the world that the young people see. That's what builds their self-confidence. That's what builds their self-esteem, is seeing that they can make a difference. And these empowerment hubs can be anywhere. They can be in homes, they can be in communities, they can be virtual, they can be real. Occasionally they can be in schools, although schools typically have a different agenda. And they can be, I think, most importantly, in companies, because they could be perhaps for the children of the employees in the companies, and it would give the children, the young people, an opportunity to interact with what the adults do at younger ages. So what am I doing now? I'm doing 2 things. The first one is trying to expand and set up these empowerment hubs around the globe. And I'm working with people on every continent to try to do it, both in communities and in schools, and even in some cases in businesses, with 4-H, with Rotary clubs, all these kinds of things. And I'd love your help if you want to do this. The second thing I'm trying to do is to help young people with more self-knowledge. So the first one I'm trying to do through the Global Institute for Empowerment, Accomplishment, and Impact by Young People. The second one I'm trying to do through the 2 Billion Kids Project. I think it's a shame that our young people don't know, really often can't say, what are your dreams? What are you interested in? What are you good at? What would you like to do next? And a lot of it is that nobody asks them, but even when we ask them, they often say, I don't know. I've often thought that there should be a way, the equivalent of that person I described who knows you as you are, something, perhaps it's an app, something you do once or more a year, perhaps on your birthday, that takes all your inputs, whether they're game-like inputs or certainly age-appropriate inputs, and asks you questions, and then just suggests, you might want to look at this, you might want to try this, you might want to do this kind of project. So that's my second, I sometimes call it the birthday book. That's my second project. And so that's it. And Kevin often asks, says that I can have a few asks. Says to people, well, this is
I
a really
do.
great group. And he
What do you
does.
want to ask for, Mark?
And thank you for asking what I want to ask for. I have actually 3 asks. The first one is, if you can, read my book, Empowered, with the beautiful new cover. And Bruce, thank you for holding it up. I see you're doing that. I'd love to know what you think. It's gotten some very good reviews. John Seeley Brown loved it, but it hasn't sold a whole lot. And if you read it, please take the time to put up a review. The second ask is, I'd love to invite everybody to be an early reader and participant in my new book, Third Millennium Kids, and to help me see new examples of what the young people are capable of, what they're doing, what the barriers might be, and all of that. So I invite you all to participate in that. And then the third ask is, I'm looking for other people in the world. I've discovered I'm a radical. But John Seeley Brown came up with a great phrase for me. He said, you're a radical, but you're a useful radical. And I like thinking of myself as a useful radical, but it only works if I find other people who are receptive and who are thinking along these same lines. So if you know of any people who are doing this, any groups, any think tanks, any people who are really thinking radically about young people in the future, I'd love for you to help me connect with them and for them to help connect with me. And those are my asks. And that's what I love. And thank you very much.
All right, very good, Mark. Thanks for sharing that with us. You're you just showed us where you're wounded. Okay.
Oh, yes, I had a little biopsy done yesterday. It's nothing
Well,
serious.
we hope that you are going to stay hale and hearty as you navigate this mission. So let me bring in co-host Mike McGuire, and lots of ambition here, right? I'll say that John Seeley Brand is right. Okay, better to be useful radical than a useful idiot. All right. We have a lot of those running around, right?
Or a
Too.
radical idiot, yes.
There you go. Mike, what is occurring to you as you heard what Mark is trying to navigate? What's before we go to other people who've joined us, what's running through your mind about his thesis?
Well, I think, I think it's a fascinating topic and an exciting one. I note, some of those challenges that both young people and their parents face, are still kind of the timeless, Mark. I mean, not all of us go to school and by eighth grade know exactly what it is we're going to do with ourselves. But the challenges now is that I see, I think you're identifying some very important new challenges that, as you've all long said about this project, and I think I can hear the refinement in some of your descriptions, your positioning that from previous conversations you and I have had. Some of those things are universal and timeless, but I think we are living in a different time where the competence in something now is in any kind of subject, right? Is not just a competent level that is recognizable to each of us, in a given field, but now competence is beyond, is the examples are usually kind of the very top percentile, right? You're only good at as an architect and if you're being compared to I am Pei or somebody like that. And that notion of empowerment, I think, is particularly helpful. And I think there are, as you and I've talked, I love the way you're kind of approaching it now, which is how do I align with other entities or people who see the same situation, and we can augment existing modes of education, and things like that. And I think that's finding those partners is probably I think you have a great thesis. I think it's how do you align with the right kind of partners, and by that I don't mean just individuals, right, but is it entities, etc. And is that kind of a path you're going to be pursuing? It seemed you mentioned that, but is that like we talked about boys and girls clubs and things like that as potential alliance, I guess, allies, for lack of a better word?
Absolutely. And thank you for that. That's what I plan to do over the next year. I plan to talk to all these groups, the Boys and Girls Clubs, the 4-H's, the Scouts, all of these things where the young people are. And it's very hard with the schools. Very occasionally you get a school who wants to do something like this, but they can't fit it in most of the time. So, but there's a lot of other places that are important. And again, I think companies are really important. To this timeless thing, I think that's has a lot to do with the emotional sides and the fact that that has not changed because our emotional side is the one thing that hasn't changed in the 100,000 years. These things are thought of as timeless, and I've heard if I had a nickel for every time somebody said you can't change human nature, then I would be a rich guy. But guess what? We're moving into a time where maybe we can change human nature, or we can get around human nature, just like we are getting around some of the limitations in our thinking. And so I'm very interested in having the young people enlist in whether we can really do things differently. I don't think I don't have any illusions at my age of 78 in 2 weeks that I'm going to necessarily change the world, but I'm surely going to leave a roadmap that I think and of the ways I think it should change. And I'm looking for other people to, that's why I want people to read my books. And that's why I want to meet other people who are thinking like this, because I think we really, that's what I can offer. And, you know, look at Leonardo. Some of his ideas showed up 400 years later, right? The helicopter and things like that. So you never know. And that's, but thank you for that. And I also think that the idea of competence is really changing too, because it's what's changed is the value of experience. And it used to be experience when we had a world that repeated essentially, that didn't change that much. Experience was very valuable because you'd seen it before. You wanted a doctor who had seen all as many patients as possible, seen as many things as they could. Now we're in many ways it's becoming less important because it's experience in a different world. And so while that may not be true in medicine, it may be true in other things. And if you have, and I remember talking to a very senior guy who's the head of one of the big, I can't even remember his organization. I wouldn't say it even if I did. And he said to me, and we were talking about this, and he was disagreeing with me, and he went, "All my 40 years of experience tells me that." And I'm thinking, you know, all that 40 years of experience doesn't help you in this new world because it's what it's telling you is wrong. And so that's the world we're moving into. And it's a world of exploration. It's a world of discovery in many ways, not in every way. But I think that that's something I love to foster in young people.
Fantastic. I'm going to add Richard Boyd to our conversation. Richard, you were the first to contribute in chat. Delighted to have you with us.
I had the chat up.
And I think Mark is an advisor to your company, Ultisim, if I'm not correct.
He's been my life coach for several decades, whether he knew it or not. Yeah, first time caller, long time fan. So but no, Mark, I've used, as you guys know, I've used a lot of his ideas in my concepts and presentations for a very long time. I've tried to implement as much of what I've learned from him in the raising of my own children. And, you know, I'm very interested, Mark, in all the ideas from all of your books about, you know, uh, asking that question of, you know, what's different about this generation of kids today, but also who do we need them to be, and how do we help, you know, with whatever skills we have, shepherd them towards that. As you know, I was on the board of a school out in the West Coast that was started by James Cameron and his wife, and the reason I got attracted to that is because they started with what does this world need? You know, what kinds of people do we need to make? And I know it sounds like a very crass way of stating it, but then, you know, working backwards, what should education then be? And we brought in Elliot Washer from Big Picture Learning, and we brought in Sir Ken Robinson and a bunch of other folks trying to figure all that out. And I'm not sure that we ever did, right? We're still trying to figure out, like, how are they different? What do they need? How do we help empower them? Um, and, you know, one of the things, I just talked to Elliot earlier this week, and or actually end of last week, and he said, look, we have to get kids out of schools and into these other kinds of environments where they can thrive and learn and be, which sounded to me very much like some of the subtext of your work. But I'm interested in just like the question I posted in chat, like, what are we seeing that's so different about this generation that gives you um, confidence about where we're headed?
Well, thank you, Richard. I do have a lot of confidence about this generation. I'm a real optimist. And the reason I do is because I've always seen people as having something in them that we want to bring out. And if I if I had put up a slide, there's really one slide that I think resumes what I think. Somebody once asked me, is there a visual that you can say? And the visual is from the past, which was putting things into kids' heads. And you just described them, what we want people to be, what we think, what this should happen. And we did that as parents, as culture, as schools. Now we need to bring things out of their heads. And guess what? If humanity changes, that's a good thing. And if we think that we can say, well, this is what we want, these are the people that we want, this is the society that we want, that is what we want. That's perfectly okay that we want it. But I see that as second millennium thinking. We wanted that. This is where we think things should go. And so we control the kids in whatever way, and I use that word control to get them there. And you can, or manipulate them, or do, you can put it in a positive sense as well. We try to encourage them to get there. But that's not what I think we should do. I think we should let them get to where they want to get to. We should explore that early. We should give them the sophistication to bring it out at earlier ages. And we should say, well, what do you think about the world that's like this? And I hear this from my 18-year-old all the time, how he sees the world. This is good, or there's too much greed, or there's too much this, or whatever it is. And let's build a better world now that we have the tools, now that we've passed into this third millennium, where we suddenly have the tools to do so much more, where we can extend ourselves intellectually so much more than we ever could, and in terms of capabilities, and build things virtually and on earth, and we can really instantiate our ideas. That's really what we can do now that we couldn't do before. We can instantiate, a 3-year-old can instantiate their ideas. That's what's different. And the impediment is that our emotional side hasn't caught up with that in any way, shape, or form. So we still bully, and we still do all these things. And so we build this wonderful technology of social media, which could do so much. And what does it become? It becomes a place to bully. And that's what we have to change. We don't have to do, and the knee-jerk reaction of adults is often, well, that's not part of our vision of the world. Let's prohibit it. Let's ban it. And my answer to that is, no, let's not ban it. Let's change the world so that this is a powerful tool, and all our tools are now powerful tools in a positive sense. When a kid says to me, I want to change the world, I say, be careful, because Hitler changed the world, right?
Mhm.
What you want to do is improve the world. You want to make it change in a positive sense. And we don't, I think, communicate that enough to people, not only that they should want that, but that they could do that.
So, Kevin, it's okay if I do a quick follow-up on that?
Yeah, go ahead. And Max next. That's why
Mr.
he's up.
Moderator. All right, Matt.
Yeah, go ahead.
But yeah, so one of the issues that popped up during my tenure there at Muse was parents coming in, and remember, this is a place where Matthew McConaughey's kids go, and Kanye West, and all that, J-Lo. But they were like, look, it's not okay for you to be experimenting on our kids. Like, you're trying new things, and we don't. It's like, look. So this question of measurement came up, like, how do we do that fine-tuned measurement of, like, are the things that we're experimenting with, like project-based learning and trying to make kids more confident. And one of the things that we had to do, and the kids beginning in like the 4th grade had to do, was stand up in front of like the full audience of parents, including like J-Lo and Matthew McConaughey and everybody, right? And actually talk about what it is they're passionate about and what projects they're working on, and and have that level of confidence. But one of the big worries that came from all the critics of that system was, like you just mentioned, what might be the second, third, fourth order consequences of the actions we're taking with, and these are our kids, right? So we're worried about that trajectory. And I remember one of my reactions was like, they're already being experimented on by social media and by these other things. And what we're trying to do is get a little bit, like, the word was control over that, and guide them in a direction that we think is going to be better for them, and actually counter some of those activities. Like, there's no technology at Muse before 4th grade.
So here's the way, and I think I've even put this in earlier books. This is what I say to those parents who say, don't experiment with my kid. And I have slides of a guy pointing and saying to this kind of thing, because we hear that a lot. And what I say is, we're moving into a new times. We don't know what everything about that time. We don't even know that much about that time. And so not to experiment with your kids is the irresponsible thing. The irresponsible thing would be, okay, we'll just keep doing the same old stuff, and we'll assume that in a new environment that will work. And that's in my view, that's the deepest thing that's changing and that the parents don't understand. Now, I support what you just said is great. And it may work for every kid and it may not work for every kid. And it may, we can refine how that happens. But the idea of knowing who you are and being able to express that and act on it in the world, in a new world, is super important because you're a pioneer now. If you're in the third millennium, if you were born in the third millennium, you are a pioneer. Nobody knows this world. Nobody has grown up with AI and all these things in their pockets and all of humanity's knowledge in their pockets and the ability to communicate with anybody on the planet. And I look at examples like Greta Thunberg, who has started out with the old methods of demonstrating in the rain, and she went to the old methods of mass communications, which are 20th century. And then she started gradually starting these strikes that she could do by contacting people, and they're very local. But I think Greta has the power to ask every young person in the world and she can ask, and I don't know whether they do it, but I think they would, to go on strike permanently from school until climate change action happened. And if she did that, enough of them, I think, would probably do it because they don't want to be in school anyway. And it would disrupt society incredibly. It would disrupt the parents tremendously. And so kids don't know they have that power yet. I call them kids sometimes, but I really mean young people. They don't know that they have the power that they have because it's new. And we certainly are not going to tell them they have that power because it will be too disruptive for us. So, so that's what we need to do. And that's what I hope would happen in empowerment hubs. It's this I can, and then I choose, is it positive or negative? And then I do it and accomplish it and see what it does and hopefully see measurable positive impact. And so the answer to the parents is yes, yes. If you want to be a responsible person, let's experiment like crazy.
Mac?
And thank you, Kevin. And Mark, as always, brilliant thinking. Thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to continuing this with you if you have time to meet today.
I do.
Two just kind of ill-formed thoughts and questions. We've discussed the idea of what organizations could play the role of carrying this forward. And one of my concerns is reach. Is there enough size and momentum to create a tipping point that actually drives significant permanent change? And where there's an idea out of systems dynamics that it's not the impact of something necessarily as much as finding the most effective point of leverage.
Yeah.
And it's that leverage that moving beyond the 4-H and moving beyond future farmers, which I do think is kind of a project-based organization to look at. Have you and let me get both questions out or I will lose the thought. Have you considered the role of repurposing unions? Some place that actually reaches a large number of people and a large number of working class and precariat people as the vehicle to carry this. And the second question has absolutely nothing to do with that. It has to do with a lot of what we call emotion today, I believe, is really just evolutionary psychology. It's not that we are becoming emotionally involved in something, but it's that millennial of genetic programming just kind of kicks in certain situations. And have you or anyone on the team considered the role of technology in intervening in that kind of in the cave and back in the pack programming that we all share?
Yes, that's exactly what I mean by artificial emotional intelligence or gene manipulation or whatever it is. I think it's high time we started thinking about that and not saying that human nature will never change. and that we can have no influence on the human nature that nature developed 100,000 years ago. I think we can now. I think we should. I think there's some dangers involved in that, obviously, and that scares the hell out of people when they say they're going to do that, especially maybe to their kids. But it's something that I think that if humans want to advance as a species, we're going to have to do. Your suggestions are brilliant. I will definitely follow up on those kind of things. But here's something, and this is an idea, and I'd love to know what people think about this. There's a new way to go to scale. We used to go to scale top down. We would get big, we would build something big, we would spread it around. The British Empire, for example, is a good example of that, how we would do that. The new way of going to scale is going viral and it's essentially peer-to-peer and saying, okay, I love this, I'm going to go with it and I'm going to share it with all my friends. And I'm going to do that. And that is the way, things like now a Taylor Swift or whatever it is go viral. It's just by sharing and sharing and sharing and sharing. And I think that's what I suspect will be the way. The peer-to-peer viral way will be the way that this will go, because I see when kids come out of this, or young people come out of this, what I've seen through Design for Change, through these projects, through First Robotics, through all these kind of things, they are so different and so happy and with what they've done, and so proud of themselves, and so enthused. If you've ever been to a First Robotics rally, it's incredible. It doesn't have any measurable ends for the world yet. It should be, they should be building robots for finding landmines and robots for doing the things that we need. But the enthusiasm that it generates when the kids do their own projects in their own teams with their own ideas is unbelievable. And so that is what I think needs to go viral. I'm very open to ways it can do that. I thought that if inserting it in the schools will not help at all. It'll help a little bit, and they try to do that with projects, but most of the projects, they're so constrained about keeping the kids in the school, they don't let them go out and do the things in the world. But mostly, if we could set it up alongside, if there were kids, if we could do the real experiment that we need to do. Okay, we're going to do 2 months of sitting in class learning from your teacher. And then we're going to do the same kids, not different kids, the same kids, 2 months of doing real world projects, or 6 months, or whatever it is. That's the experiment we're not doing, because we're always comparing one group that did this, which is a different group of kids, from the other group of kids that did something else. That's not a valid experiment. And if we did the experiment that I'm talking about, where the same kids went through different things, we could then measure what their reactions were, what they did, how they did it, how the parents saw them coming out of the room, all these kind of things in ways that we just can't or don't today. Yeah. So that's what so I'm very grateful for all these suggestions. I will follow all of them. I love unions. And I try to do this worldwide. So I'm talking about people in Africa, and I'm talking about people in India, and I'm talking about people in other continents, in Europe and South America, and obviously North America, where we're kind of more resistant than anywhere else in the world. But yes, we need to make this figure out better ways to have young people be doing this.
Outstanding.
Thank you.
Ben.
Hey, Mark, very much appreciate the discussion today. As always, very, very stimulating. I have three really quick things. First of all, on your discussion just in the last few minutes, that notion of viral structure, the answer lies in we're better informed by nature than we are by our industrial age mentality that has that pursuit that created the educational system and other things and corporate structures that we inveigh against as well. So I think we need to trust and lend ourselves to this distributed growth that nature informs on. That's how nature grows. It's not how institutions grow. Second thing is really quick on the title. I hope you don't use the term kids in there. I would rather hope you use youth, because they are youth. They are made kids or declared kids. And so it has a pejorative box in it that I don't think is deserved. And that relates to my third point, which is when you first started talking about the frontal cortex growth, I thought, oh crap, here's Mark telling us to kill imagination early by growing the frontal cortex early. But if you look at a natural tension, maybe our mission is the opposite. It's retard the frontal cortex development. We need to extend youth, extend imagination. We are extended lifetime for people, yet we expect them to work along life patterns that were developed 100 years ago. And so we do, although we had some regression just in the last few years in lifespan, very likely the first person to live to 200 years is already alive right now. And that we do have extended lifetimes, but we're not reframing life. And maybe part of our mission is retarding that frontal.
And I'm glad you said that, because I didn't make my point clearly enough. That's really what I'm talking about. In other words, I'm saying we're better off without it. And it used to be a feature, and maybe now it's a bug. That's why I say it like that. That we need some elements of it. It's not that planning is not important or other things are not important. Of course they are, but we don't need it to overrule our lives so that it overrules our imagination. So your words are better than mine there. I agree on the kids totally. I never liked the term. It's baby goats, but some of them use it a lot, but there's not a really good other word other than people who happen to be young. Youth doesn't mean in some places what it means to us. In Canada, youth means people who are in their early 20s. In a lot of the world, that's what it means. And that's not the people I'm talking about. So how we, and maybe we can all say alphas, or we can say something different. But
No, I understand
agree.
it's a marketing decision thing.
Yeah.
Well, no, I'm looking for a title. So believe me, that title is not in stone in any way. And if anybody comes up with a better suggestion, I'll certainly consider it very strongly.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I would just
your help.
add that while you're pursuing this, right, for a group of young humans, all right, coming along, all right, I just wish that some of the adults had more executive function when they were imagining that they had screwed the bolts into these airplanes, all right.
Right.
So I think that there's a little bit of a both and here, all right, of you need to be able to continue to exhibit some imagination in adulthood, but you also need to know when to turn on the executive function for some mission critical stuff, right? I don't want imaginative people running a nuclear reactor, right? So.
Well, yes and no. Yeah. So your point is well taken. I understand exactly what you're saying. And the interesting thing is that to me is that how many, there always have been exceptional young people who, like Mozart's, who did some things. What's really interesting to me is how long it took humans to make checklists important, like doctors and stuff like that. And when you're talking about those bolts, I mean, a checklist would have worked there.
100%.
And and that literally, the book on checklists just was a bestseller a year
A tool
or two
go
ago.
on day.
Right, a year or two ago. So maybe our executive function isn't totally working perfectly, and if you could take the part like checklists and give them to young people, like I try to do to my son, and he knows he has to do when he flies, that might make a difference. It's how we see these things. I just say we're not that great. As we become adults, we flaunt, we say we are the greatest things, and we are humans, and we're, people-centered internet and all this kind of stuff. And guess what? We have a lot of flaws that we can work on.
Yeah. Bruce, you have the last question and comment. Come on in.
Yeah, one of each. The comment is that, what we have here collectively is a mini think tank, and I really appreciate it. I mean, the thoughts that are here, the insights that are here are, at least to me, invaluable. But I want to go back to something that Richard said, and I think has been missing just a little bit in this discussion. And Richard raised the issue, and that's guidance. I mean, it's wonderful to say, oh, well, the kids ought to be doing A, B, C, and D. But the truth of the matter is that kids can run the car over the damn cliff if the seniors don't stand up and say, hey, wait a minute, you better check your brakes. Where you're heading is going to be a disaster. If you don't have, you can call it control, Mark, but I'm not certain it's control as much as it is insight that you give to these young people, because I think that in large part that's what's absent is the insight that rests and resides with older people who have been down this road. Now, you may say that, well, the road going forward is different, which it always is, but it also has some continuity to it. And I think we've got to recognize that continuity and make it available to people, and not do it in such a way that young people think that we're trying to control them. We have to be able to offer insight and truly wisdom. And that's my thoughts and comments.
Thank you. And I agree. Obviously, you don't want to bring up kids without some guidance. And the question is how we give that guidance to a large extent, and whether the guidance is relevant. And so those are the two questions. What happens often is that young people reject our guidance because they don't think it's directed for them. And
Right.
that goes back to what I said. We need to see them as they see themselves. And young people are perfectly capable of executing checklists, and they're perfectly capable of doing kinds of things if they think it's in their interest. That's the people do things. It's just like we suddenly discovered that young people are very capable of teaching each other how to play video games because they did it. And no adult taught a kid how to play a video game, and they just did it virally to each other because they wanted to do it. They thought it was important. And if they wanted to do something that is dangerous in our view, or maybe dangerous in the world, like driving could be, then they are perfectly capable of making the checklist and doing the things that they need to do this. And if we want to help them because we have some experience, we should learn to do that in ways that are meaningful to them and that are not telling them what to do. And that the real, and maybe this is more personal than anything else to me, but I never do anything that somebody tells me what to do, and Kevin knows that pretty well. But and unless, but I do if it's in my interest. So I will temper my language because I want to stay in a particular group. I will do things that I think are in my interest. And so much of what being a young person is not being concerned at all about your interest. It's being concerned about our interest. And so that if we can make that switch as adults and say, well, okay, we have our interests, but maybe that's not the best thing. Obviously, our goal is to keep our kids safe. I don't argue with that and what we do, but it gets taken to incredible extremes. Esther Wojcicki talks about how she used to take her kids to New York and they would play around and do all these crazy things, and now she can't go there, or she can't go there without 25 EpiPens and in her pack, and more you can't leave the school building at all. So what we're doing is because of our fears as adults for the safety of our kids, which are justified, reasonable fears, we are controlling them, and I use that word, in ways that we may not have to do. If they're in this new world, they will experiment, things will go wrong, There will be some harm, just like there is, people will be bullied, all these kind of things, and then we fix it.
Yeah.
And then we fix it.
Mark, and because of your self-discipline, right, and use of language today, this recording can enter into some places and conversations afterward where you're going to want to be heard. So that's a great thing, right? We like your candor, and we appreciate your thinking. Thanks for being with us today, and going a little bit over time, right, for today. And I encourage everyone to take a look at Mark's writing, what he's encouraging. And Mark, as we conclude, is there a process on how to start an experience hub? Do you have
Yes.
a little one pager that says, this is how to do this?
I do. I'm increasingly writing them. I have an online book called How to Start an Empowerment Hub. I have written extensively. I have a one pager of the guidelines and what makes an empowerment hub different. So I have a lot of materials on this, and I'm putting together more.
So send that to me. So when I send out the recording, I'm not sending people a book. I'm sending them, something that would be more easily
A
digestible.
link. I'll send you links. That's absolutely
Sounds good. And thanks for being with us. We greatly appreciate you being a regular contributor to Content Evolution NuWorld, and for being our guest today.
my pleasure.
Everything you do, be intentional. We will talk to everyone next week. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks again.